Fatherless Gospel, guys. I'm so excited to introduce to you guys Bethany Redmond. She's an amazing daughter of Christ, and you have been an amazing example of just being a sister in Christ as well. You've always been very encouraging, amazingly kind, and I know that that is God working in your heart and in your life. So I'm so excited to just talk with you today and talk more about your testimony.
Woohoo! Wow, I'm really excited to be here with you and really honored to meet you. And I've told you this before, but I really do admire like how much you have really made the beauty of Jesus and just shining his light. Like you've made Jesus known on social media, and which is, typically a dark place. So I just want to thank you and honor you for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I definitely can say the same thing for you. It's really just awesome to see how you are always pointing things back to Christ. The one thing that I wanted to ask you is, have you always been walking with Christ? Or when was the moment that you knew that this was Lord and Savior and that you needed to follow him?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I feel like there have been multiple seasons in my life where I've had to return my heart back to Jesus, even after already giving my life to God. But no, I did not grow up in a Christian household. I wasn't raised around Jesus. I did have a grandma who lived with me and helped raise me because I grew up in a single parent home with my mom. My mom worked a lot. She was working 3 jobs. My mom is a superwoman, superhero. She's amazing. But it was really my grandma who started speaking to me about Jesus and who had been praying for me since the day I was born, which if you have a praying grandmother, watch out. You're toast. Game over. Really? If you've got a mom or a grandma or a woman in your life who's praying and contending for your salvation, you might as well just surrender now. But I had a praying grandma in my life, and she would speak about Jesus a lot growing up, but I really didn't have ears to hear it yet until I was in middle school, which honestly, growing up without a father in my life, that had been really one of the biggest tools of the enemy to really try to take me out, because from conception, from birth, I had this thing lording over my life of rejected, unwanted, this stronghold over me, even as a baby, that you're not wanted because of the way that I came into the world. My mom and my dad never actually dated. They never married. It was kind of a one-night stand situation. And my dad was told that he was infertile. There's absolutely no way that he would ever have children. He had doctor's letters, diagnoses. He was in between a marriage, in between a second or third marriage or something. And at the time when he met my mom, and he basically he knew that if he really could have had children, he would have had them already.
Wow.
So by the time he met my mom, just, one night stand in the bar, whatever, the world, all that stuff.
Yeah.
My mom comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm pregnant." He instantly was "You're a liar. There's no way. You probably were sleeping around. It's not mine." So, naturally they take it to court, take it to court, get a DNA test, totally Jerry Springer style. "You are not the father." They take it, they take it there. And my mom, did the testing, and it turned out 99.9% his, whatever.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
There's no doubt. And my dad still was kind of okay, well then I want nothing to do with this. I will pay you your child support checks. I will cut you your checks, give you your money, but like, I want no part of this. My dad had kept my existence as a secret. Like he told no one in his family. Like no one in his family knew he had a child, which is crazy, for 4 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, but I met my dad, and yeah, like, you know, he was there. He was a part of my life for a few years, you know, doing the, you know, cordial, like professional thing of like, okay, I'll show up for holidays. Here's a Christmas present, you know, come sleep over every once in a while. But I really didn't have a relationship with him. And that kind of dwindled really, really fast until, you know, I barely heard from him. Yeah. And when I got to middle school, that's when I actually started to notice what I didn't have. That's when I actually started to look around at all my best friends who had these incredible godly fathers, these incredible parents, like literally parents who would pray for their children before they walked out of their car, all that stuff. And I started to look at my own life and I'm like, okay, so there must be something wrong with me. Like, or God, like God didn't see me as fit to have a dad like that. And my mom, I just have to blow my mom up a little bit because my mom, to this day, she's amazing, but she literally did everything in her power, in her strength to give me the best life, the best childhood. Like my mom literally sacrificed her entire life to be, my rock, really, my foundation. Yeah. But it's crazy, like the way God designed family, even in Genesis 1, like there is power in a father, an earthly father being there and showing up. And there's even there are things that a father carries that a mother just doesn't. And that's the beauty of being a woman. Yeah. There are things as a woman that a man, no matter how hard he tries, will not be able to be. And the vice versa. And that's why in Genesis, when it says the two shall leave their mother, their father, join together as one, like that is it's like the completed picture of the Father's, like of God's face on the earth. And so as hard as I tried to, think I don't need a dad, I don't need men. Like my mom is, all I need. And as much as my mom tried so hard to be mom and dad, the original design of family is that a father is essential. A father is so needed. And that's why I had this ache in my heart that would not be quenched by anything. It wouldn't be quenched by popularity, by boys, by even like nothing, like being successful, like literally nothing could fill that thing in me. Even when I tried to tell myself, like, you don't need men, like you don't need fathers. Right. Like at the end of the day, like I had this ache in my heart. It was a God-shaped hole that only he could fill. I didn't know God yet, so I didn't know that he was the one that was going to fill it, but it was there. And I just remember, I remember having this memory that I just recently had an encounter with God about this memory, where I was about 7 years old and my dad had told me, hey, tomorrow I'm going to pick you up and we're going to go to Disney World, because I grew up in Florida. Yeah. We're going to go to Disney World. And as a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, like, woohoo, that's excited. Yeah. Like nothing else mattered but that. Yeah. And my mom knew that my dad was very flaky, very wishy-washy. Well, it was very much in his nature to make empty promises. I didn't know that because my mom never spoke like wrong of my dad ever. And which was, my mom's incredible. I don't know how she does it. But yeah, so like my mom knew that he was not going to show up, but I didn't know. And so I'm sitting in the living room, literally from sun up to sundown, my face glued on my living room window, just waiting for him to show up. So I was so excited.
Oh no, this hurts my heart.
This is real and raw. This is really what happened.
Yeah.
But he never showed up. And my mom the next day was like, hey, next week we're going to go to Disney World. And my mom, actually did take me. But I remember as a 7-year-old making this vow in my heart, which I didn't know I was doing this, but I made this like thing like this. I like declared this in myself of like, see, like I don't need men. Like, I guess you don't really need a father. Like women will always, pick up the slack or whatever. Like I don't need him. Which I unknowingly had carried that my entire life. And even recently, I noticed like I still sometimes battle with that mindset of like, even with God the Father, I don't need you. I can do this. I'm strong enough. I got this. Like all this. I don't need to be needy or dependent or desperate. Like that's gross. When in reality, that's like exactly what he calls us to do, be poor in spirit. And Jesus in the vision turned to me and said, and he quotes John 15, as the Father has loved me, I've loved you. Abide in my love. And I just lost it. Absolutely lost it because I'd realized I'd seen the Father wrong. I'd seen him even as a believer, even as someone who has followed Jesus all my life and blah, 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 or not all my life, but, followed Jesus for a long time. And, claims to know God, I still had these wrong perspectives of the Father, that he was mean or that he was this tyrant God, just like making a notebook full of all my mistakes and everything I've fallen short in.
Right.
And like, I've just seen him as this man with motives who was gonna, dangle promises in my face and then rip them away, say, you can't have them. Like all this stuff that stemmed from my earthly father, that stemmed from that moment. Like when I was 6 years old and a promise was broken by my father. Yeah. And it, like 21 years later, I'm having to deal with that and having to really like repent and see God rightly in that moment. And like this journey that I've been on with God the Father, I'm having to look back at these moments like in middle school when I was just so angry and so broken. And I'm seeing all my friends around me with fathers and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, making these like statements about myself of like, okay, I guess I'm not worthy. I guess I'm not, loved. I guess God doesn't even exist because if he's my father, like, and, they say God's my father and my real father doesn't exist in my life, then God doesn't exist. Like making all these blanket statements and, holding to these things about myself and about God, like even in that, I'm having to look back at that and see that Jesus was there in it, fathering me through it, walking me through it, that it's not like like the minute that you turn to him, he all of a sudden appears. It's like, okay, great. Now I can be in your life. He was there through it all. He was there in the delivery room when I first took my first breath, and he'll be in the room when I take my last. Like he doesn't just decide, okay, great. Now you're a good person, or now you've, repented and got your life together. Now I'll be God. Now I'll father you.
Right.
He was there the entire time, like waiting for you with arms wide open, calling out your name, like in my own life, just waiting for the day. I'm sure he was full of joy. Just like, I just can't wait for the day she sees me and says yes to me. And that day for me, when I actually did encounter God for the first time, was when I was in 8th grade. And it was a really, really bad day. I was by that time in my life, I was flunking classes. I was in detention. I was literally that girl. And so at that point in 8th grade, I was starving for identity, starving, and I could not find it. I had no idea who I was. I was longing for someone to give me identity. And the only answers that I was getting about my identity was rebellious one, was unwanted, rejected. I didn't have anyone come into my life and say, hey, this may be your story, but that's not who you are. This may be what you were born into, but this was not your fault. And I want you to know, though you might feel like an orphan, you're a daughter. I didn't have that until this moment in 8th grade. I was, my mom picked me up from school and we went to just like a food place, a restaurant or whatever. And my mom was actually really awkward and kind of she was acting off. Yeah. And we were just sitting there at a booth and I'm like, what's wrong with you? And she had this newspaper in her hand and she kind of was like, I don't really know how to tell you this. I don't really know what to say. And so she hands me this newspaper and on the front page of the newspaper was my dad's face, like a mugshot. And I was kind of like, that's my dad. Why is my dad? Yeah. And he had gotten arrested for sexually assaulting women, multiple women. And I had no idea. And he was married was married at the time. And so as an eighth grade girl, as an 8th grader, as an 8th grader, starving for identity, I was really angry at my dad already in that point of my life for just not being there. And to see that, this man who's supposed to be your father literally didn't think of you at all. Because if he did, he would see I have a daughter and these other women are daughters, just things like that. To me, it was the ultimate slap in my face of you're doomed. This is your fate. You are rejected. You are an orphan. Your father literally wants nothing to do with you. And yeah, this is your story. It just felt the final blow to me.
Yeah. So that would bring so much confusion seeing that. Because you're in 8th grade, you don't fully understand those things. There's an understandment, but versus how we saw things during that time period versus now, our minds are so different.
So different.
I can't even imagine how tough that must have been for you. So I'm sorry that you did go through that.
Yeah, thank you. It was definitely really, really, really tough. But I went home that day just broken as ever. And I was in my room all alone. I'm just bawling my eyes out. And I'm kind of at this point where I'm I honestly, I just hated myself. I didn't see purpose in my life. I didn't see any point of value at all. And I'm just sitting on my bedroom floor, just crying. And I'm okay, I either end my life or I see if God exists. That's kind of my last resort, because I'm literally, I got nothing. I've got nothing. Yeah. So if I find out God doesn't exist, I have nothing to lose, except my life, whatever. And so I didn't even own a Bible for myself. I had my grandma's Bible. And I took her Bible and I didn't even know how to read it or where to start. But I I don't know if you've ever done this before where you flip the Bible open, you just point your finger and you're okay, that's the verse of the day.
I've definitely done that.
That's kind of what I did, except I didn't read it. I just literally opened the Bible, hoping it had some like magical powers, and nothing happened. And I'm see, this is not working. God's not real. So then I just in distress. I was if you're real, you need to prove it, and you need to prove it now. I'm done. I'm so done. And I literally felt like, it's kind of like hard to explain, but literally I just felt this tangible, warm love come over me. And it felt like almost like arms just like hold me like this. And it was like weird because I never, ever, ever, ever experienced that in my entire life. Nothing close to it. I had no context for that. I didn't have people be like, God sometimes will tangibly come in your room, like, and hug you, and his presence will, like, I didn't know anything about that stuff. Because I ran away from that type of stuff. Being in like private Christian school, I didn't want anything to do with that. So when it happened to me, it was like overwhelming, but it definitely gave me this like, okay, he's real. Like, this is undeniable. I've never felt this love in my life. And I didn't hear him. I didn't necessarily have a scripture or anything, but it was just like that instantaneous, like, I'm loved. Like, I'm loved by him and he loves me. And like, I want to know him. I gotta, like, I need to change my life, really. And the next day, I didn't, there wasn't a pastor in my room. There wasn't a worship team leading me into the presence of God. It was at my broken moment, my rock bottom moment of like, hey, I need you. And he came, and it freaked me out. But I instantly was like, cool. So there was a process for sure, because it's not like that very next day, I was like sanctified and redeemed and healed of everything.
Right.
But that initial encounter for me was enough for me to be like, okay, I don't know about all this pain and all this stuff that just happened and all my questions and everything, but I know he's real, and that's enough for me to at least try. And he's changed everything. So.
Right. And I love that so much, because it's so true that only God can really fill in that gap and complete us.
Yeah.
And one thing, there's so much, and I love this conversation, but one of the things that really stuck with me is how you reminded us how your mom did your best. She did her absolute best. And I know that there's a lot of single mothers who need to hear this as well, is that they have done their absolute best, and there's nothing wrong with kids still feeling that void, because I've seen that a lot of moms still feel like maybe they didn't do enough.
Yeah.
They have to fill in that gap, and only Christ can fill in that gap.
Yeah.
It's so important that we're able to just be reminded of that. And then also just how you reminded us of the original design. God designed for there to be two parents, the mom, dad, and child. That's how kids are naturally born. So it just shows that the design is incomplete. But it's amazing to note that God does step in when something like that is broken. Just like how you mentioned in Psalms. And it's amazing how you have been able to just see that in your life, how God has been able to step in and be that father figure. Because I know there's like a huge epidemic of people who didn't experience having a father, or just a parent, whatever it may be. So I'm really glad that you have been able to just share that side and that like emptiness, and also just how God has always been there for you.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. Is there like, what was the toughest thing about shifting your mindset from seeing that you're not going to have an earthly father, but that you do have a heavenly father? What was the biggest pivotal point of that?
I would definitely have to say like my perspective of God, because it's so easy for us. Like when we desire like love, for example, it's like, okay, I want a boyfriend. Okay, I want a husband. Like I want the physical, tangible human here. And obviously God gives us those desires as well. So that's not necessarily wrong, But it's when we're like, okay, I have this ache and this desire for a human, but if all I have in this season is God, it's almost like dissatisfying for us. And for me, like that was my struggle my whole life, especially before I knew God, it was like, no, I want a dad, an earthly dad. And that's something that honestly I have to still like surrender to the Lord, is this desire, this for an earthly something, an earthly representation, when it really reflects to my wrong viewing of God. Like that really, like this craving and this demand for earthly things, earthly whatever, earthly people, earthly longings, earthly desires, instead of like looking to God to fill that ache and that desire in my heart, it really just shows that I don't think God's enough. Like, or I don't think that, his love is strong enough to fill this void. It's like, yes. I know you love me, but I want them to tell me that they love me. Like, and we've all been there. It's not like,
yeah, definitely.
It's not like, oh, you're a terrible person if you have that desire, but like really seeing like the kindness and the gentleness and the patience even of God, of like, I'm right here. Like, I'll wait for you. Like, I love you. I'm fighting for you. And you're going to see it. You're going to look back and see it, that I was actually all you've ever needed.
Right. And that's so important, because one thing that came to mind is how, just as you were saying it, how everything on earth, any good thing on earth, relationships, any kind of good feeling, anything that's good is all a reflection of God. So we see God in these little things, and we know that they all go to a so much greater God, which is so, so, so important that we remember that there's a creator behind all good things. And he's just so much more than we can ever expect. So I'm really glad that you have been able to just share your testimony and remembering what it looks like to fall in love with God. It sounds like you have really fallen in love with God. And
I have.
Like, I love that. Because it outpours. And that's what God does in our lives. When you experience God's love, like one thing that you reminded me of a lot, it's not the exact same story, but it's just how in the parable of the prodigal son, how as soon as he returned back to his father, he wasn't upset. He wasn't angry that he had left him. He was just filled with joy and gratitude. And that is what God does with us. He's so happy that we're returning with them. He just wants to be there and hug us and love us. So it's like really cool to just like see how you have experienced the joy of God. And it's so, so, so important that we just continuously remind ourselves that God is for us, not against us. So we're going to be closing up the podcast soon. So what is next for you? And what is a last message you want to share with people?
Oh gosh. Well, loaded question.
I know, it's like tough.
Honestly, my greatest passion right now is to like really carry this message of no longer an orphan. I'm at this place now where I want to carry this message to others, to especially other women who struggle with, having an absent father, or, whatever that looks like in your life. Even really like receiving the Father's love, because it's something that I've really had to walk through and I've really been tested in. So I feel like God, because it has been my greatest place of pain and suffering, God's given me authority in it now. Like there are things in our lives that we've had to really, really, really wrestle with and struggle with. And we look at those things as like, flaws in our story. without really understanding those are the places, the greatest place of warfare, the greatest place of pain, the greatest place of struggle in your life is actually the very place that God's going to give you authority to carry that forth and to even carry a testimony of Jesus in. Like it says in Revelations, like you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of your testimony. And God's given you testimony, like he's given you a testimony, and you might still very much be in the writing of that testimony, and that's okay. Like, but just know it's not wasted and it's unto something. So what I'm learning now, I wrote a devotional recently. It's free. It's really not this professional thing. It was just something that I felt needed to be done, even an urgency, as just like a little simple, like tool guide of how to practically even break agreement with these lies and to really ask God specific questions in your time alone with him. That just like my friend did for me, like, okay, ask Jesus, where was he in that memory? Okay, ask Jesus, show you where the Father, who the Father is. Like these very simple childlike questions that can really like have Jesus take you in deep and really like show you a new side of the face of God that you haven't seen before. And so I'm learning now to actually like to bear the witness of Jesus and to share like what God has done in my life through a really painful thing. Right. And one thing I just want to leave with Psalm 32. I remember the first time I read this verse, I've never read this verse before. And the Lord literally told me, go read Psalm 32.
That's awesome.
And I went to it and I bawled my eyes out because this is the promise that he will father you. And this is what he says in verse 8. He says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Be not like a horse or a mule without understanding, which must be curbed with bit and bridle, or will not stay near you. Many are the sorrows of the wicked, but steadfast love surrounds the one who trusts in the Lord. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, all you upright in heart. Like this is a promise of God. So good. I burst into tears when I read that. Just overwhelmed by like, you want to counsel me. You want to teach me. You want to lead me. You want to actually father me. And the only thing he requires is that you don't be stubborn. Like,
and stop to be.
Yeah. Like for all of us, like stop resisting the leadership of God. Like let him love you. Let him lead you. Like if there's anybody that we shouldn't have walls up with, it's God, because he sees it all anyways. And he sees the end from the beginning and everything in between. And he's not gonna let you down. Like whatever you've seen of your earthly father, you have to wipe the face of your earthly father off the face of God, because otherwise you're going to do what I did. You're going to blame and accuse and just condemn the father for things that he did not cause. Like allow him to show you his goodness and his mercy and his presence in moments where you felt like he left you and he abandoned you. Because if there's one thing I know about God, he does not break promises. And if he said with his covenant, even with Abraham, his covenant with Moses, like these big moments in biblical history where he makes these covenants with the nation of Israel, he says over and over and over again, I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. I will not abandon you. Like I will be your God and you will be my people. And it's the same today. He still has not broken his covenant with you. Like he still has not forgotten his promises over your life. So just surrender. So yeah.
Because there's a peace and rest that comes in surrendering to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy you brought this up because it's so important that we see how instruction, it's a loving, beautiful thing. Just like you have like a wild horse, like being able to submit to God. There's so much rest. We're able to rest in the Lord. And we know that how you were mentioning that God only wants what's good for us. He is a good father. He's not going to give us something that is going to make us rotten or spoil us. He's going to do everything to perfect us in the image of Christ.
Yeah.
So amazing to know that he cares so much about us, that everything is done in his perfect timing. And I'm just so excited to see that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for taking the time to just be on here, for sharing your testimony, for being vulnerable and honest, and just for continuously pointing everything back to Christ. Like, you really are a woman of God. And I just know that you are in my prayers. And thank you so much for this time. And it was so good getting to talk with you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I just love you.
We'll definitely be in touch. And I'm going to link down Bailey's cover song and all her different accounts so you guys can check them out. You definitely post some beautiful content. So I want to share that with the world. But thank you again. And thank you guys for listening to this podcast. And we'll see you guys on next week's episode. You guys have a good day. Bye.
Bye.